But we're still in the book of 2 Kings, and specifically we're in 2 Kings chapter 4. We've already looked at the first part of 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 1 through 7, where we see Elisha and the widow. That's where it is that the widow had come to Elisha because her husband, who was among the sons of the prophets, had died. And then not only were they dealing with the problem that he had died, the primary provider for the home, but they literally had nothing. The creditors were coming. They were going to take what was left, and the only thing she had in the house was one jar of oil. So what did Elisha tell her to do? Go to all your friends, all your neighbors, get as many empty vessels, containers as you can, and then just start pouring the oil. And the oil kept pouring until she ran out of containers. And then she had more than enough after that. And the lesson we had learned is that God provides more than enough even with our little. And so that's what we saw from the very beginning. And then right now we're looking at this middle section of the book, or of the chapter rather, which is the main portion of this chapter of Elisha and the Shunammite. We got through the initial part of this looking at her hospitality and how Elisha returns the favor to this woman. She was doing all of these things for Elisha, like feeding him. Her and her husband constructed a room and furnished it out for him to stay in. All of these things she was doing just simply out of the goodness of her heart. Her and her husband making all of these things happen, looking for nothing in return. But if you recall, at the very end, what is it that Elisha promises to her? She's going to have a son, right? This time next year, he says, you will have a son, a child in your arms. And then sure enough, verse 17, exactly as Elisha said, God delivered, and they had this son. And so everything looks great at this point, but if you've read through 2 Kings chapter 4, then you know there's a distressing situation that comes. And so this is where we're going to pick up in our study today. If somebody could, go ahead and read 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 18 down through verse 25.
And the child grew. Now it happened one day that he went out to his father, to the reapers. And he said to his father, my head, my head. So he said to a servant, carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees until noon, and then died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and come back. So he said, why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. And she said, it is well. And she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel.
And then we'll actually go ahead and stop right there. We'll catch the latter part of that in a second. Thank you, Johnny. So we look here and go back up to verse 17 or verse 18, and we see that there's been some time passed since verse 17. Verse 17, the child is simply just a baby, and then it begins verse 18 that the child grew. We don't know exactly how long this had been, but as we know going through that the child is obviously aware enough of when his head hurts, he can point to his head and recognize that. He can tell his dad exactly what it is that hurts, my head. And of course, he's able to go out there into the field with them, so I'm sure he's not crawling around out there. But if he recognizes these things, that he's probably at least a toddler at this point. But of course, as we look at it, this is a situation that is not a pleasant one really to think about. He's gone out into the field with his father, and they're out there as they're reaping. And I mean, you can just picture it, that here you have this child, this little boy who's gone to work with his dad. I mean, that's essentially what's going on here. And he goes out into the field, and then he starts telling his dad, my head, my head. The text doesn't say exactly what it is that was causing the problem, why it is that his head was hurting. There are some different possibilities here. Some have suggested, well, maybe he got hit in the head by one of the reapers. I don't really think that's the case, because that would have been very clear and obvious to see if that had happened. Some have suggested, well, maybe it was something like meningitis or malaria. Maybe so, we don't know. Really, probably what most people say is they think it could have been some form of a heat stroke that brought these things on. I mean, all of that's just supposition, but the result, we know what happens from it. This child, his head is hurting. The dad says, well, let's carry him back to his mother. And so the child goes back to his mother, and he sits on her knee till noon. And unfortunately, the child passes away. Now, when the child passes away, what is it at that point that the mother does? She's ready to get to Elisha, right? She's ready to go search and find him out. She takes the child, lays him on Elisha's bed, closes the door behind her, and then goes out to the dad. Now, it seems like the father does not know what's happened to his son at this point. All he knows is that, okay, son had a headache, something's going on, sends back to mom because dad's, more often than not, our child is hurt, is sick. We don't necessarily know what to do beyond a hug or a kiss, and mom tends to know what to do better. And so we see that's what's going on here, and mom doesn't necessarily tell dad what happened. All she says is what? Saddle up a donkey, let's get what we need so that I can go see the man of God. Now, what's the father's response to this? Yeah, why? It's not the typical time that we would try to go see him. It's not the Sabbath. It's not the new moon. The new moon kind of being mark of a new month, but also it was a time of sacrifice and offering, reflection as far as those things go. So those would have been typical times to try and see or offer up some form of worship, just a special time. The father says, well, no, it's not one of these typical times, so why are you going to go see him? And of course, what's the mother say? It is well. It will be well. Right? This is a theme that we're going to see throughout the rest of this section, that no matter what's going on, the mother is able to look past and recognize it is well or it will be well, depending on the translation as we look at these things. Now, you think about what's going on in this, and you think about how she's able to say it is well or it will be well, despite what's happened. How do we think that this mother is able to say that? Faith. She may have lost her child, but she had not lost her faith. One writer said she is convinced that a God who could give life once could give it again. And I think that's a powerful statement to recognize, to show just how much faith and trust that she has in God. Now, I always, as you know, like to try and show maps whenever I can, just to kind of give some reference as far as where we are. Of course, Samaria is sort of where all the major things have been happening, but the tiny spot up here is Shunem, and we showed that whenever we got into the first part of this section. But then over here is going to be kind of where Mount Carmel is, somewhere in the range over here. So not too far of a distance, but significant enough if she's willing to leave her son who is passed back home to go and to get the man of God. And of course, in the process of it, she's very clear that she wants to get there quickly. You look back at verse 24, and she tells the servant who had saddled up the donkey and everything for her, drive, go forward, do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. She's adamant that she wants to get there to the man of God, and so she heads off to Mount Carmel. Now let's keep looking. And Johnny, you had finished off kind of halfway through verse 25. So if somebody could pick up there where Johnny left off, where New King James says, so it was when the man of God saw her. If someone could pick up there and read through verse 28.
So it was when the man of God saw her afar off, that he said to his servant Gehazi, look, the Shunammite woman, please run now to meet her and say to her, it is well with you. Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? Keep going.
Yeah, through verse 28.
And she answered, it is well. Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me, and has not told me. So she said, Did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, Do not deceive me?
All right, so she makes it there to Elisha, and whenever she's there, Elisha says to his servant, Gehazi, how Aaron said it. I usually say Gehazi. I don't know, you probably say it differently, and I'm going to say we're all right. Just say it with confidence. That's the key. So Gehazi, he says to him, look, here's this Shunammite woman. They knew her well from all the time that she had fed them and the times they had stayed there in their home. And so he recognizes her coming. And Elisha says to Gehazi, go meet her. And what is he to say? Or what's he to ask? Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child? Elisha knew that there had to be some reason that she's coming to meet him. And of course, in asking these questions, he's trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? Why is it that you're coming? Right? The husband recognized it's not one of the typical times that somebody would come see him. So what's going on? But when Gehazi asks the mother these questions, is it well with you, with your husband, with your child? What'd she say? It's well. Now, some could look at that and say, okay, she's trying to be deceptive in this, and I don't think that that's what the case is. And really, we've already asked this question. I should have put that further up in my notes. But she asked the question and answers, well, it's well. And we know the reason is because of her great faith. And when we can develop a faith like this woman, then we'll be able to say, no matter the situation, that it is well all the same. But of course, once she gets closer to Elisha, she shows that her soul is in deep distress. She falls down, she comes to the man of God, caught him by the feet, she's holding on to him. And what's Gehazi do? He tries to push her away. It's interesting to me, the more that I've gone through this and kind of in the following chapters, looking at Gehazi and Elisha, and you see two totally different people. It's interesting in the fact that Gehazi really seems to be, and he'll show his true colors as we keep moving through the text, he kind of seems to be in it more for himself. And he doesn't want to necessarily be inconvenienced, and we're going to see by the end of chapter 5 that he's looking for his own profit in these things. And he doesn't always understand why Elisha does the things that he does. But of course, Elisha is quick to reprimand Gehazi. He's quick to make sure he understands, no, it's okay. Don't try to push her away like that. He says there in verse 27, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. This tells us here that obviously Elisha had some ability to recognize different things, that God had revealed to him certain things that may have been beyond the typical knowledge and comprehension and understanding we have, but this is a situation that had not taken place. I think there's a good lesson in that because it tells us that if we don't act, we might never find what we're looking for. If the Shunammite woman had just stayed at home and said, well, Elisha knows me, Elisha knows my situation, he's a man of God, he's just going to call me up on the phone, he's going to send me a text, and that's how we're going to get this figured out, because he's just going to somehow know that I need help. Is that how it works? No. Do we ever operate in that way sometimes? That we need some help ourselves and we just kind of try to tell ourselves, well, so-and-so will call, so-and-so will send a text, and we'll be able to get this worked out when it comes. What's the best way to get help if you need help? You got to ask. Don't be afraid to saddle up like the Shunammite woman and go and get some help. Thankfully, we don't have to saddle up on a donkey and ride 20 miles and go up into the mountains to try to find this one man. Right? We can pull our phone out, send a text message ourselves, make a phone call ourselves, reach out and get the help that we need when we need it. Because if we don't reach out and seek that help, we may never find what it is that we are looking for. But of course, this woman, as she is there before Elisha, Elisha's aware that something is going on. She begins to reveal the situation. Verse 28, as Aaron read for us, she said, "Did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me?" And that goes back to verse 16, because the woman didn't ask anything of Elisha, did she? And when Elisha promised that she was going to have a son, she was pretty quick to say, "Please don't lie to me. Don't deceive me. Don't build my hopes up like that." She's just being realistic with Elisha. "I didn't ask for this. I asked you not to deceive me, and now I'm going to be blessed with a son for within just a few years him to be taken away from me in this terrible situation." And so she's clearly asking Elisha, is there something that can be done? And that's what we're going to find here in these next couple of verses. Somebody read verses 29 through 31.
Then he said to Gehazi, "Get yourself ready, and take my staff in your hand, and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child." And the mother of the child said, "As the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you." So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them, and laid the staff on the face of the child. But there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him, and told him, saying, "The child has not awakened."
So we see these verses here that AG just read for us. And we find that Elisha instructs Gehazi to go ahead of them. He gives Gehazi his staff and tells him to do what with it? Just lay it on the child, right? Lay it on the child. And then the child's mother says, "No. I mean, he might go on ahead, but I'm not going, Elisha, unless you come." Right? She had that trust in Elisha, of course, recognizing as well the faith and the trust that she had in God. But Gehazi goes on ahead with the staff. He lays the staff down on the face of the child. There was no voice, no hearing. He was obviously lifeless still at this point. And so Gehazi goes back outside. Now, when Elisha and the mother show up at the house, what would they probably, or what might they be expecting to see? Gehazi and the child outside, right? That's the hope. But unfortunately, what do they find? Gehazi's coming saying, it didn't work. Now, maybe this is just some supposition on my part, but I wonder if there are any lessons that can be learned from this failed attempt, if you will, to raise the child from the dead. Think back to what we've already seen from Gehazi here in this text. Did he seem to have a true compassion and concern for others? I mean, the woman comes to Elisha and falls down and grabs him by the feet, and Gehazi's there saying, "Go on, get." He doesn't care what happened. But now here he is going, and he has this opportunity, but if the heart's not in the right place, it's not going to make any difference for him. Did he have faith? That's a good question. Very possibly he doesn't have the faith he needs to have, and that may well be why this doesn't take place.
See a parallel with the 12 apostles?
Mm-hmm. You think about the 12, even back to when he's shooing the woman away, you think about the 12 apostles when they would shoo the children away from Jesus, and Jesus says, "No, let them come to me." You think about when Jesus sent the 12 out on the limited commission, and they had some power, some ability, and then later on when it is that they have the opportunity to cast the demon out of the boy, but the Father comes and says, well, they couldn't cast the demon out. And of course, at that point, Jesus goes ahead, he casts out the demon, talks to the 12. That kind can only come out by prayer and by fasting. But you recognize there were these opportunities that were had, Old or New Testament, that didn't come about in the way that you might have hoped it would. I think there's powerful lessons in it. Maybe he didn't have the faith he needed. Maybe it's because his heart wasn't in the right place. Again, the parallel you see even with the disciples, the apostles in the New Testament. I think also in this, another kind of underlying thing is to let go of superstitions. One of the things that would have been common in that time from some of the study I'd found was that different prophets or priests of the pagan and false gods and idols a lot of times would have some symbol, whether it was a staff or a rod or something like that. And there was a belief that just that object could bring about whatever it is that they needed to be done, whether some blessing or some curse. So maybe it's the case that this is kind of a lesson if Gehazi's faith is not in God like it needs to be, and he's thinking like all the others in the land, well, guess what? It doesn't work that way. Because we're going to find that it was only when they turned to God as they need to, here in the next few verses, that the healing and the raising would come about. So let's go ahead and look now where Elisha raises the dead. And of course, we understand it's really God who is doing this. But let's have somebody read verses 32 through verse 37.
When Elisha came into the house, there was a child lying dead on his bed. He went in therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. He went up and lay on the child, put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. When the child sneezed 7 times, the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite woman." So he called her. And when she came in to him, he said, "Pick up your son." She went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out.
If you are somebody who tries to visualize and picture these things in your mind, this is a really odd section to picture and to visualize. Here it is that, Gehazi is saying he's still lifeless there on the bed. And Elisha just kind of brushes past him, goes in, closes the door, and then stretches out and lays down, completely covering the boy. Right? He is completely covering him in every way at this point. And, he prays to God through this. He gets up, he kind of walks around for a little bit, goes back, completely covers the boy again, laying down over him. And then the boy starts sneezing. And he keeps sneezing, and he keeps sneezing, and he keeps sneezing, and he keeps sneezing, and he keeps sneezing. And of course, he then comes to life. He had been raised from the dead. Now, Elisha, at this point, calls for Gehazi, says, "Gehazi, get the boy's mother in here." And Elisha tells the boy's mother to do what? Pick up your son. But instead, what does she do? She shows her gratitude and appreciation and respect, does she not? Elisha wasn't asking for that. Elisha knew in the moment, your son who's been dead is now brought back to life. Go hold your son. But she's ready to show her appreciation and respect to Elisha, which in turn, of course, is showing that to God. Just as God had graciously blessed the Shunammite and her husband with a son, He graciously raises him from the dead by the prayers and the hand of Elisha. Now within this, I think there's another really good lesson for us to consider. That if God is able to give physical life to the one who has died physically, the application for us, how much more can God provide life to the one who is dead spiritually? But now let's put ourselves in the situation. If not for Elisha coming, the boy probably wouldn't have come back to life. If not for the boy's mother taking the initiative to go and to get help, the boy's probably not coming back to life. Think about situations in our own lives, maybe within our own families, maybe it's friends, maybe it's neighbors, whatever the case may be, where somebody's like that boy, who once was full of life, maybe even spiritually speaking, full of life and on fire for God, and now spiritually speaking, they've died. Are we going to be able to go get some help and take initiative like the mother and go say, I'm not sure what to do in this situation. It's beyond me. I need help in this. Are we going to be willing to be like Elisha, To make sure that, yes, we pray to God to figure out and pray to God and communicate with Him about the situation, but then will we be willing to do something that might be difficult and uncomfortable and maybe even a little bit awkward to try and help bring some spiritual life back to the one who's died spiritually? We need to make sure that we do our part because we know certainly that God is going to do His. And so that's what we find from Elisha and the Shunammite. Anything that anybody else has on this? Yes, ma'am.
Just made me think when Gehazi went and wasn't successful, just because somebody's gone to someone else and tried to restore them, are then we going to take Elijah's standpoint and be like, well, I mean, they weren't successful, so I'm not going to go because obviously they don't want to hear it. Or are we going to go ahead and, like you said, do the uncomfortable thing? So just because somebody else has tried doesn't mean we shouldn't try as well.
That's a really good point to bring out. If you didn't hear Kay just thinking about how Gehazi had already gone and it didn't work for him. So what if Elisha had said, well, if you couldn't do it, I can't do it either. Right? Sometimes just because someone else has gone and it wasn't successful at that point, maybe it just wasn't time. Maybe it just wasn't the right person. Maybe it wasn't the right situation. But we still have a responsibility to be like Elisha and go. And even to add to that, you look at what Elisha does. Elisha goes in, he prays to God, he lays down, covers the child, and what happens? Not really anything happens, right? So he stands up, he walks around, kind of reevaluates, and he goes and he does it again. So even the first time Elisha tried it, it wasn't happening at that point, right? Very good point to bring out. Thank you, Kay. Anything else on this before we move into the next section?
Only thing that I'm thinking about when we started reading this was how long it took the mother, how many days did it take, so to go get him, if Gehazi, and then they had to come back. We're not talking like getting in the car, we're
No.
not like a 15-minute drive down the road. We're talking.
I mean, this was an all-day affair here.
We're talking about a period of time, this child is laying dead. So that just, to me, shows the power of God,
Mm-hmm.
because nothing's too small.
Absolutely. I mean, you see here in this chapter, like Velda's point in that is just recognizing the power of God in these things. The amount of time it would have taken for the mother to go and to travel and then to come back. And all the while, it's very clear that the boy has died. God's power can bring that boy back to life. You think back to the initial thing we have with Elisha and the widow in this chapter, right? God can do something as small as taking one jar of oil, and of course it's not a small thing, but one jar of oil and filling more than enough for them. God can bless this woman and her husband with a son. Something happens, the child dies because he's physically alive, right? We understand being physically alive means that we're going to at some point pass away. But God's able to bring that boy back to life. Even thinking back into chapter 3, and I'll get you in a second, Paul. Thinking back into chapter 3, what is it that was said in the midst of all that rebellion in verse 18? All those things that were going on, verse 18, and this is a simple matter in the sight of the Lord. It's not a simple thing in our eyes and in our ability to dig ditches and expect water to just miraculously appear. It's not a simple thing to be able to go and to conquer and to take out this rebellious group of Moabites. But in the eyes of God, it is a simple thing to be able to do this. When we hit that point in chapter 3, Kay, I think it was you who brought out just thinking about all of the things that we may not understand, that just don't really compute with us. But just because we don't understand it and it doesn't make sense to us, doesn't mean that God cannot bring it about exactly as He says. That's what we're finding in these chapters. How much faith do we really have that He can accomplish it? Let's go, Paul, and then we'll come back to you, Jared.
To go along with that, if we think about a prayer life, and we get into, in some cases, we have things to pray for our food, we may pray for various things. Every time we have a meal, we pray for our food, whatever the case, but we get into where a prayer life may become situational. Like, okay, I want, or I think I need need something to change or be better, and we pray about it, and maybe you pray one time and say, well, I prayed about it, and then the result didn't come out the way, or at that time didn't change. You say, okay, well, I prayed about it, so I'll move on, I'll wait, I need something else, or I want something else. Instead of being constantly praying and constantly thankful for the blessing that we have. And maybe it's the case that what you prayed for 5 years ago finally came to fruition, but it was in God's time. And we don't understand it, like you said, and so it's, you know, it can quickly turn into, we just pray when we think we need or want something at that point in time, and in Elijah's case, he just prayed once and said, well, I was unsuccessful as well. No, he kept on.
Right.
And if God, you know, chose to not restore the child, then that was the answer, but Elijah didn't quit, he didn't stop, he just kept thinking, asking. That's the way we need to be. Regardless of what our life is, what situations are going on, we just keep praying.
We need to be like the persistent widow that Jesus spoke of, and just keep praying, keep asking, keep on knocking. And that's a really, really good point to bring out, Paul. Jared?
Just further build this point, thinking about the amount of time, you know, this isn't more than just praise and song. You know, like people today, they go without oxygen for, you know, so many minutes. So there's some serious thing that takes place. But we're talking about hours, not the entire day. You know, not only made back alive, but also full functionality without, you know, problems or anything of that nature. Just further that idea of God's power.
Right, yeah, and you think about the, if you didn't hear Jared just thinking about how the amount of time that had elapsed, and we know today somebody goes just a shorter amount of time without oxygen, or there's some deprivation there, you're not getting all the oxygen to the brain that you need, that causes problems and some real damage. This boy was without oxygen and completely dead for all of this time, yet in the power of God raising him up, there wouldn't have been the problem there. Think about all the miracles in the New Testament, right? When those who were unable to walk from birth, Jesus heals them and now they can walk. There would not have been any strength in those muscles for them to stand up immediately and start walking, or to start jumping and leaping about, right? Part of the power of the miracle is that it's not just partially done, but it's completely healed and taken care of. And it just gets back to that amazing power of God. Saul, Geraldine, and then David.
I was just going to point out, obviously this situation is kind of an extreme of something looking odd to us, but just kind of a basic point of application that I draw from that is that like our blessings aren't always going to look what we might not, like what we expect them to maybe. Like God's ways do look a lot different than ours, and he works differently, and he doesn't work like this through people anymore, but still our blessings might sometimes not look exactly like what we would expect them to, and so sometimes we kind of miss them because it's not exactly what we were looking for. But
yeah, no, and that's a good point, that it's sometimes we have to sort of reshift, refocus to see the blessings. And also within it, I think too, and I don't know if it's exactly where you were going, but something that came in my head while you were saying it was thinking about the blessings of other people in our life and how they can help us. We'll go David and then Anthea.
Just a thought on why she didn't tell her husband or trouble her husband. He was in the field with the reapers. So evidently it's in the fall, the harvest time. That's his most stressful time of the year. So she knows that for him and doesn't want to burden him. She thinks, I'll take care of this.
Yeah, and that's
So
very possible too. And even thinking back that before they had the child, it was recognized he's older. And so it may just be something she knows he can't take that type of heartbreak and heartache to hear that news. And so she's going to try to do what she can, like you say, take care of the situation, because she knows that Elisha and that God are going to be able to help her out in it. So that's a good thing to recognize. Anthea?
Kind of off Geraldine's point, just I think about Jesus and his followers. Even in the beginning, they had this thought about what kind of kingdom Jesus was going to bring to them. And then when he died on the cross, some of them were kind of concerned and confused. They were like, was this actually who we thought he was going to be? Was he going to? And then when he finally raised from the dead and showed them, like, this is an earthly kingdom, this is going to be a heavenly place. I think it kind of threw them for a loop because they were expecting one thing, but it was even better in the end.
Yeah.
Completely different than what they
Yeah.
thought it was going to be.
I'm glad you went there, because in our sermon this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about some of that with the kingdom. And so that helps me out. Thank you, Anthea. All right, well, I appreciate all of y'all's conversation and everything in class today. That always helps out tremendously.